What is up, Mr. Gregory? How's it
How
going, my
are you?
friend? I'm
How are
good.
you, man? What's going on? Thanks
Good,
for having
good.
me.
Yeah, no, thanks for the chocolates last Valentine's Day. I was very appreciative of that.
No problem. I send them out to all the special people in my life.
Yeah, I got a little sick though. I don't understand. What did I do something wrong? Did I?
Did you eat all of them in one sitting? Because that can totally do it.
Yeah, yeah. That was on me. I told you I was allergic to mushrooms. I thought mushrooms were weird for a chocolate covered candy, but
It's 2023. Get with it. We're going fusion all over the place.
that's like huge. We're mixing
You like
antique
shiitake
chocolates.
caramel? What's going on?
Yeah, who doesn't? That's
Exactly, and that's
yeah.
that's the truth.
That's my next restaurant. Actually, I'm gonna.
That's
Uh,
good.
actually, I do have an idea for a restaurant. It's gonna be called First Date. Because like everyone's like, I don't know, what do you want, right? Where do you want to
So, and
go?
the waiter's the same way. I don't know.
I don't
What's
know.
good here? I don't know.
Yeah. So they go to First Date, and it's actually a fancy restaurant. That's the funny part, right? But
Yeah,
everything on the menu is, I don't know, whatever you're having. I'm not hungry. I don't care. But they're actual meals,
yeah,
like they're
I like it. It really takes the pressure off.
yeah, exactly. What do you want? I don't know. What are you having? That's a thing.
Yeah. And then the waiter just walks away, they don't even realize it because they haven't really looked at the menu yet, and they're like, "Where did he go?"
Yeah, what's going on with the waiter? They're making
Sweet
us
time.
wait. Whose job is this?
Yeah, exactly.
You know. Well, as a professor of words, do you enjoy puns?
I love a good pun.
Excellent, excellent. So the waiter thing must have been funny for you. 10 days later, you'll call me up and be like, "I got it."
Got a pun,
Yeah,
absolutely.
you
As a
switched.
former waiter, I appreciate all waiting puns.
Now, how long were you a waiter for before you realized that you wanted to leave the restaurant business and be a professional XYZ?
Oh, well, I realized I wanted to leave the restaurant business as soon as I got into it. However, I stayed there for many, many years as a cliche job of an artist. So I would say I probably started working in a restaurant when I was 15 years old. It was like my first job,
Yeah,
and I would be a bus boy. And then over the years, like all through college and grad school, that was always my survival job. And busboy, waiter, barback, a little bartending, and that whole thing.
hmm,
And did that for many, many years. Um, and then even after I left actual restaurants, I started doing like catering in between acting
yeah.
gigs and things like this. So when I would get like a big gig, I would kind of like leave, and then it would close or whatever. I was like, ah, I guess I'll go back. But I did that for probably almost 20 years.
Wow. All right. And what have you learned from that? If you could go back in time and smack yourself and be like, do this instead, what would you do?
Um,
OnlyFans. No.
yeah, right. Um, Keep the apron. I don't really regret it per se. I think it kinda really sharpened my people skills and,
Hmm.
my interactions and dealing with different, personalities. Um, it's a decent job, especially I worked in a when I lived in Hoboken, I worked in a artisanal pizzeria called, Dozino, and that kinda became, like family. Whenever I would get a gig, I'd just be like, "I'm going away for, like, a month," and they were like, "Alright, we'll just see you when you get back."
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to kinda, find, that level of, maneuverability with a job.
Absolutely.
So I really don't regret it because it also allowed me to write a lot, right? When I wasn't working, and if I had to go on tour, I would go on tour or whatnot. So no, I'm generally not a person with much regret.
Yeah, because Brandon Sanderson himself worked an overnight job where he was basically security, and he just
Mm,
wrote his books during that time, especially when he was in college and stuff like that.
there you
Um,
go.
but he's on another level than us.
A little bit so.
Yeah, he's like, I'm gonna write a book, and then 6 books later, you're like, how long did that take you? 3 months? Come on.
Yeah.
Uh,
I have a friend who took a job as a concierge like overnight specifically so he can work on his novel at work
oh, that's
because no one's
fun.
coming in the building at 1, 2, 3 a.m.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you get stuff done. No one's bothering you.
Absolutely.
People can't even pronounce concierge, so you know,
Exactly.
yeah, it
It's a
worked out
win-win.
for him. Is there a job you think would benefit you um to write a novel or a script where you not the hotel job, but like what do you think is the ideal job where you could take advantage of the system, get paid to sit around and almost do nothing and work on your book or script? Like, what kind of job do you think that would be?
Oh goodness. I don't know. The concierge one is pretty close. I mean, that's like really close to gaming the system. It has to be something that's not a lot of foot traffic and that you have access to a computer.
Oh, so like a
Maybe
fluffer.
maybe security. Yeah, probably not plumber. Probably not something you do with your hands.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, not a fluffer.
no, no, definitely not.
Which,
Well, in between takes.
yeah, that's just it. You only get a couple of seconds and then you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I've always found that you kind of just carve out time as needed, right? And to, if there's not time, you make the time.
That's
I think
right. Yeah.
Scotty from Star Trek said that.
That's funny. I'm not sure if you watched the show, but I like to kind of like get, make it a little bit more conversational. And
Mhm,
but we also have to get down to the nitty gritty. People are listening to the episode because they are either writers themselves, want to be writers, aspiring writers, or they've been doing it for quite some time. But we always the purpose of the show is to realize that no one's path is the same, and
that's
what works
true.
for one person doesn't work for another. But it's always nice to hear a change in the process because, hey, sometimes we're still looking for our own process. So we usually start with your writing process without going into a long gist of it. Let's go back and forth a little bit, but let's start with the beginning process. How do you what what creates the urge to write the book? Like, how do you work on the idea before you even get into writing anything?
Sure. So for me, um, it usually starts with I have something I want to say, right? So I guess to boil that down, usually my work stems from some sort of topic or theme, right? I have an observation of the world and I have something I want to say about it, or this is a really cool topic idea. How can I expand? So for me, that's usually the starting point. And for me, I have like a like I view my mind as a like a percolator. Like the idea has to percolate.
Mhm.
So I never write any idea down when I first get it. Like that's kind of my rule for myself. If the idea goes away, it wasn't really worth its salt. However, if the idea keeps coming back, right, in the back of my mind over and over, once a week, once a month, I know I at least have something there, right, for me. I have something worth exploring. So that's step one for me.
If I may, I believe that's similar to Stephen King's method. Is that correct?
Probably.
Isn't he the one who said
He also writes like 3 hours like every day of his entire life,
well,
so it's
yeah,
interesting how many ideas he must have backlogged.
and he's a
Uh,
pantser, but yeah,
yeah.
like, there was an interview where he basically said that, and, 'cause I think you're right. Because if it's something, but it's not that it doesn't have salt. I think what he was saying, or even just in general, is that you're connected to it passionately enough to remember it because it has, like you're saying, you have something to say and it's saying something for you, and your mind is like, "I wanna work with this." But if it's like, you know, "I wanna see a dragon, fight an ogre," and then it vanishes, maybe that wasn't something you really wanted to tell.
Yeah, or, is there enough there, right?
Yeah.
Is this inkling of an idea, right? Can this sprout into something, you know, large enough or big enough to discuss?
Like
And if not, maybe
democracy.
that can just become like a short story or like a poem or something,
Oh,
something
yes.
like that. So that's kind of part of it too. Where does this belong, right? Is this a short story? Is this a screenplay, right? Is this a novel?
Yep.
And so that's like this also step two then of my process of trying to place it. So if I have the idea and it keep coming. And as you say, the passion is there enough, right? Because any sort of artistic undertaking is an endeavor, right? I mean, it's not like, all right, 2 hours,
What are you
knock
talking
that out,
about?
right? It is a
First draft done.
dedication. Yeah.
First
It's a
draft done, 2 hours. I did it over the weekend. It's finished.
it, it's a
Published.
dedication of time, and so you have to ask yourself, is this worth it? Right? Is it
Mhm.
worth my time? Is the potential there? And so this is kind of part of that initial process. And for me, if it keeps coming back and comes back, it's like, okay, there's something there. I don't really necessarily know what it is yet, but maybe this is worth exploring. And then my step two process would be, I'm
Well,
gonna
before we get
spend.
into the step 2,
Okay,
let's
okay,
let's talk about, yeah, yeah. I didn't wanna block out. I wanted to kinda, like, talk about things. So,
yeah.
With that said, have you ever been in a situation where it did gestate to a point where you were basically like, I'm ready for step two? But once you started working on step two, you realized the idea wasn't something you wanted to put your time into now that you're seeing it unfold. Have you ever had a situation like that?
Um, no. No, not really. A guy spends so much time with the idea of the idea, before step 2 ever happens, where even if, let's say, something didn't turn out as well as I hoped it would,
Yeah.
I've never got to the point where I regretted, putting this down on paper. I never felt like it was, a waste of time.
Like eating 4-day-old tacos right before you go out on a boat. The idea is interesting,
Yeah.
but you
It's all
instantly
about the
regret it.
execution.
If the fish can poo in the water, I can.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so you'll sit there and do
But
you
but
have a
but but
timeline?
to your
Oh,
point, though, to your point, I've had many ideas that it's like, this isn't worth anything more than the initial interesting one-liner, like
yeah,
like your example, you know what I mean? I've had many things where I'm like, "This isn't making it to step 2."
yeah. Like ultimately, the tagline or the log line was like, "That's interesting, but not enough for me to be like, let me write something out of it."
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
now, do you give yourself a time limit that if you don't feel something has any weight to it by X amount of time from the first thought, you kind of abandon it? Or are you okay with an idea taking years if be so uh, uh, before you even write anything? Or like so basically, do you set a time limit or are you okay just letting it go?
No, I just let it go. There's no time limit. For me, um, if I have forgot about it, it's over. It's probably not coming back, or I have very consciously decided this is the end of the road.
Yeah.
However, if it keeps creeping back, and this usually takes like months for me, like the reassurance I need for me to be like, okay, there's something here. Um, it, because step two for me isn't like delving into the writing process. Step two for me is to say, I think I'm ready to just start taking basic notes of this. So everything going on in here, I'll just like jot down in what used to be a notepad, and now it's just my laptop, right? And sometimes it's just names, phrases, titles, a basic plot, right?
Maybe a
Something like that.
scene,
I'm sorry.
maybe like a scene or something.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, and that's step 2, and then once it's kind of down, it's kind of solidified in the things in the realm of possibility that I'll work on, right? And so I have like 100 of these where
Yeah.
that have gone on to onto my little step 2. And they're all there, and then you can only write so much, with so
Jibber
much
jabber.
time. Yeah. So usually I'm like, well, what is convenient for me to write next? And by that I mean, do I have enough time? This is a bigger undertaking.
Yeah.
Do I have time for that? This is like a short story I want to write. Can I get this done right in a reasonable amount of time? So that's where it starts getting a little practical and logistical for me.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, I got no time. Poem it is. I got a poem in me. I'll write a poem." And so the good part about that for me is that if I did become wildly successful and some publisher was like, "I want to sign you a 10-year contract and you have to put out a book a year," I have enough in my arsenal that I know I would actually want to write to actually like take that up. And
Yeah.
this has been accumulating since, like, since I was very first started working in the restaurants. Like, it's been a long, long time.
Yeah, one of my writing mentors, they told me it's better to have treatments than it is to have complete novels or complete scripts, because especially in the film industry, you know, the first script, even if like you've worked it for years, is not the script they shoot if it gets picked up by a studio. They're going to definitely either have their own writers look over it
Yep.
if you're a nobody, or they're gonna have someone work with you like a head writer if it's a show. But ultimately, the script should have the essence. I always talk about it everywhere. Is the movie $3,000, which eventually became Pretty Woman. That's not the movie they filmed because then there would have been murder, rape, like all this other crazy. But Disney bought it, just for the
Right.
record. They bought the script as it was, with all the vileness and the harshness. And then what they ended up filming was ultimately not even the script, because uh um what's his name, the
Richard
director.
Gere?
No, not Richard Gere. The director. He did Happy Days. He created Happy Days. I always say his name, and now I'm forgetting his name. His daughter did League of Their Own. Jesus, I hate when that happens. Who directed Pretty? Gary Marshall. I didn't even have to
Oh,
finish.
there you go.
Gary Marshall. But Gary Marshall kind of improved ideas and scenes, and they led to what Pretty Woman became. So I always so that advice, when he gave that to me and told me to look into certain people and stories, I realized he was so right, because a treatment, or even like you're saying, just having those ideas in the back end, or in the magazine of your gun, like they're ready to shoot, but they're not worked per se. You're No one's going to turn that down,
Right.
you know.
Then the opposite example of your analogy is like Sharknado, which I think started off as actually a completely serious movie and treatment, right? They got turned right into that,
Yeah, but
which
again,
is
they didn't
interesting.
use the original script.
Yeah.
It was reworked.
Yeah, so sometimes a big studio will buy something for either potential or, they have an idea, they don't want to get sued. And so, well, let's just buy this. So like we could just use anything we want in it, even if it's nothing.
Yeah, and then shelf
And
it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And
and shelf it.
they do that in the gaming world too, and publishers don't do that as much, but it is a big thing in film and television. They were like, "Great script."
Yeah, exactly.
We have the same idea, but that's also, I forget you probably know what the name of it, but there's a phenomenon for, like, when a movie comes out and then like another movie comes out within the same
Oh,
week, and
yeah,
it's the same movie,
yeah.
but it's just different actors or something. What is it? Just Friend. What is the one where not Just Friends? Friends with Benefits, and then there was another one where Ashton Kutcher was
Ashton
in one
Kutcher,
movie,
Mila Kunis. Yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah, it
yeah.
was in the other with Justin Timberlake. They
Yes.
were the same movie.
This does happen with a weird degree of regularity. I've had writer friends who who have literally written scripts, went a certain way with them with studios, and then even had famous actors read them and like them, and then it all falls apart, and then a year later, pretty much the same movie comes out with that actor, which is must be very frustrating,
Serendipitous.
right, for a lot of writers who are writing for the sole purpose of selling their scripts,
Yeah.
is to try to make a career out of that.
Which is
um,
interesting because, like, I've had several mentors over my lifetime in this industry, and uh, the rules that seem similar to what they have taught me is that you're not supposed to write to sell. You're supposed to write to have a career, right? And there's a difference between I'm writing this and just so I could sell it versus let me get involved in the industry and become somebody instead of trying to become somebody by writing the best script I could possibly do. And some of the best success stories, even Steven Spielberg, are people that started as nobodies working on something with somebody. You know,
Columbo, right? Steven Spielberg, that was one of the first things he directed. It was an episode of early Columbo.
oh, that's well, yeah, Columbo. But even Jaws was one of those things, like it was falling apart, and they're like, "Do you want to take it over?" And he was like, "Yes," and but he would have never got that opportunity if he wasn't in that clique. And
Sure.
even Bill Hader. Bill Hader has made Barry. Barry was a fantastic TV show, and he wrote and directed some episodes, but he obviously acted in it. And he was a PA. He was a PA on an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. And people are like, no, I want to get what Bill Hader had for Barry. And you're like, he did too, but he had to
Yeah.
start at the bottom. And people are like, no, I'm too talented. They have that bias. Like,
Yeah.
what I wrote is amazing. Of course, people are going to love it. I wrote it, but they're not
Yeah.
understanding. No one knows who you are. So why are they going to risk their value on giving you an opportunity? And but then people are like, yeah, I'll just put it in a festival. And everyone who's ever won an award in a festival has never seen success unless before the festival they had those meetings and then they use the festival as a launching pad to help market the film that's already been set in place in motion. Don't get me wrong, there's
100%.
the rare Clerks phenomenon, but that also happened because of relationships. It wasn't that people saw Clerks and they're like, let's buy this up. Kevin Smith made a really great impression on the devil. I mean, Harvey Weinstein, and and obviously that springboarded to somewhere. But
Yeah, I think part of this is the ability to say yes to things, right? Even if it's not the ideal thing you want to do in that specific moment, right?
yeah,
Like for years I did background work,
mhm,
uh, as I was, going on auditions and trying to be an actor, and a lot of actors like won't do that. They're like,
yeah.
no, no,
I need the
I'm
lead.
not a background talent. But I will tell you, I learned so much from being a background actor, just observing the way things work, what people do, how ads control a set, like how to actually maneuver like over 100 extras, and how to make 20 extras look like 200, right?
Mhm,
um
mhm.
you know it's just kind of looking at the craft. So I think no matter what you're doing, you need to be open to things and look and learning, right? Every opportunity is a learning opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Every hardship is even an opportunity if you look at it as such. And so I did background for like a few years. I feel like I really soaked up some great things. Also just networking. It's like all these
Mhm.
people here, right? They're all kind of interested in this industry on some level, right? Some
Yep,
more
yep.
serious than others. Some kind of do it for fun. Some really want to break in.
Some
Um,
are old.
yeah, yeah.
I
And
just do this
so
for fun.
yeah, a lot of people do. And so, yeah, I mean, you have to position yourself, right, to kind of,
Yes.
when the phone call does come, right, you want to position yourself where you're in the best spot for it, right, for success.
Well, yeah,
Um,
and what you do is a great thing because you got involved. And I tell people all the time, especially clients, where it's like you have a job packing out a supermarket. And is that what you want to do for a living? No. Do you want to be a manager of the supermarket industry? No. Do you want to open up a supermarket? No. Do you hate your job? It's not that I hate it, it pays my bills, but it's not what I want to do. So why don't you go do something you don't want to do in an industry and a field that you are passionate about with the expectations that you're going to proactively work to rise to a higher position with that industry. And they always have that light bulb moment goes on like I just gave 15 years to a supermarket, and you could have gave 15 years to the industry. There's no way you're going to be a PA for 15 years if you're not being proactive. I have a buddy that I helped get into Brooklyn. And then I introduced him to one person and I says, now you got to do your job. You got to network and build those relationships. Within 2 years, the guy is now ahead of whatchamacallit, um not transportation, locations. He's like a
Got
head guy in locations. But he also gets to hang out with writers, which he wants to be a writer, and he gets
Mhm.
to hang out with other, so in 2 years being proactive, he went from being a PA to now he's a upper level, right? So it's less about, well, I'm not saying I'm not going against what you said, but I'm royally
Mhm.
speaking that it's less about when I get the phone call. But you are right. You need to be available
Yeah,
when that phone call goes. But if the mentality of the person is, well, when the phone call comes, I'll leave my job and I'll
yeah.
make a
You also
living.
you also can't depend on the phone call.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to go call yourself somehow as well.
Yeah. But you also said a,
Mhm,
a really great lesson. You said sometimes you'd work at a job that they were really grateful and giving you the free time to go out for a tour, or
mhm,
if you had this going on. But that's the thing. Like if you left your job you were at for 15 years with all these benefits, and you're like, well, I just got a job as an actor. I'm a under five or whatever.
mhm.
And you do it. And then like 3 weeks later, you're jobless again. And you go to get that job back. And like, no, you left,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
you're just
that's I
like,
mean, that's
oh.
certainly a lot of that's definitely an issue facing a a lot of actors, right, trying to make it for sure.
Yeah, but you probably know as well as anyone, when you're in the background game, it's really about like once star people know who you are, they're calling you. You're not really submitting as much.
Correct.
I get work. Well, now that I'm not in New York, but I was getting consistent work on SNL, but because they were reaching out to me personally, or or even even working on a film, like just to do a couple lines, people be like, "Hey, come in, I want you to do this," you know, and that comes from putting in the effort. But we're diverging from your
It's okay.
process, so let's get back to that.
It's okay.
So, when it comes to your writing process, again, just to sum up where we're
Mhm.
at, you let it gestate, and you work with the idea for an unlimited amount of time. Basically, when it's ready to be scattered around onto pages, you like to
Mhm.
look at your scenes, quotes, ideas, names. You write love letters to me, and then you from there, actually, I have a question about that.
Yeah.
During that process where you're taking ideas that have already been worked, do you allow yourself to let brainstorming influence what you put down? Like, will you play with the ideas, or are you just going verbatim what you kind of been working on?
Um, I don't think at that point, before they go on paper, the ideas are solidified enough to not play with them,
Okay.
right? So I'm definitely um, a player in terms of, oh, what
Yeah,
happens if
you
we take,
are.
yeah, what happens if we take this character and we like, throw them in the jungle, or what happens if we take this character and we throw them in 17th century, right? What if we take
Yeah.
this character and throw him in space? Like, what happens, right? If
Well, he
listen,
dies.
a character, he will die, maybe, because the creation of a character could also be the starting point, right? Before you have anything else, like maybe there's this really interesting character that you just conceived, and you're like, where does this character belong? Like, in what story, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes if it's a bit more experimental, yeah, I'll go anywhere with it.
Which you got it. You have to allow yourself to be malleable
Yep,
to the ideas, or the ideas break.
it's
You have to
very
kind
true.
of move with them. Also, I tell it's funny. I tell people, I go, look, just because you wrote it doesn't mean that's how it has to be for the rest of your life. Like, you're allowed to play with it.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know?
you mentioned Stephen King. I mean, Stephen King is notorious for, "Oh, I published this 20 years ago. I'm just gonna change the ending now and republish it."
Yeah.
Like, he does that
I
all the
mean,
time,
Tolkien did it.
When does the story end? You know?
Right? Yeah, but Tolkien did it with the Hobbit, because he changed the tonality of it because of the Lord of the Rings. So we went back and played with the Gollum section. Frankenstein was rewritten and republished within the time of the author. So just because you write it doesn't mean you can't change it.
Yeah,
And
and just because it's published doesn't mean, I think that's the thing
yeah,
that most people never really realize. It's like, just because it's out there and official, right,
yeah,
doesn't mean it can't be changed.
yeah, because that's a first. What do they call it?
Edition?
A first edition, second edition, third edition. Like, it
Yeah,
exists.
yeah.
Same thing
Also,
with
like,
movies.
another thing people don't realize, a lot of those older books, like those first editions, have a couple spelling mistakes that got cleaned up in those subsequent editions.
That's
So
right.
that's part of it too.
Maybe that's how they spelled it back in the days before word
Exactly.
for
So you
word.
always have that to fall back
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Me, not so
They were
much. I'm like, yeah, a few months ago.
well,
It's
it's
a very
Dracula.
different time.
Yeah, but it could be like, it's Dracula. It was a diary. Maybe it was character. He couldn't spell the words right.
Exactly.
You know?
It's been a while,
Yeah, it's been a while. All right. So, all right, what's the next step after you kind of like write everything out, and you kind of get everything out of your brain on the page? What's I guess step 3, right?
Good. So before step 3 happens, I will often go back to my step 2 uh, piece, and like, just in life, if I just have an idea that adds on to like this story, or if I see a quote that like pertains to that idea, or if I read about some new concept that I'm like, oh, this would be really interesting to throw into that piece,
Yeah.
right? So the step 2 is constantly being added to, if it is not yet written. And then basically, as I always try to be writing in general, um, I teach this class called Writers Write, because that's what writers do. We write, so you always have to be writing. Um,
Yes, you're right.
exactly, the right mindset. Hey,
Heyo.
I go down my extensive list, and I'm like, what do I want to write next? Right? What makes sense for me right now? What can I do?
Mhm.
And then I just decide on one and commit to it until it is finished.
Would you
Um,
say that's like a loose outline, like just a
yeah. So you know what? It's in between these two things. If it's like a larger project, um, that's not like a really short story. If it's like a novella or a novel or something like this, then after step 2, my step 3 would become a breakdown. Like
oh,
for
okay.
my novel, I did like a chapter by chapter breakdown. I made a big timeline. And so I'm the type of writer, I need to know generally what happens, right? I need to know how it starts, generally where I'm going, and I like to know where I'm at, where I will end.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be open to adaptation during the way for things to change, right? You have to be open. Things will want to change organically. Characters will be like, "Nah, that's not me anymore,"
Yeah, I like
and
hot
you're like,
dogs, not
"Okay,
hamburgers.
sorry."
Yeah.
And so yeah, so you have to be open, but I like to know where I'm going. I like to know more than less for sure.
I actually have a question about the character thing. Now, obviously, you want to kind of see where a story goes, so sometimes you'll like play with it for a little bit. But have you ever had an idea for a character and you just saw the character going in a different way, and you know it's the right way for the character, but you hate that it's going that way? And then you kind of like, what can I do to kind of manipulate him back, that character back to what I want it to be? Have you ever been in that situation?
That's interesting. I feel like I don't think about it in that way. Like I do not judge the journey of the character, or like conversely, I absolutely relish in the horrible journey he's about to take. Like I'm invested in either one of those forks, and if this one makes more sense for the story and the character, right? Even if it's, let's say, like more tragic or whatnot,
Yeah.
I'm probably more about it. So I I have been in a situation where I'm like, I didn't think this was gonna happen, right? But I'm never distraught over the fact that it happened.
Yeah. You like the fact that sometimes there's a little chaos in your structure, and
Oh yeah, I'm all about it.
what about if it starts taking away the theme or the original reason? Because like you say, I have
Sure,
I
yeah.
have something I want to say.
Yeah, no, that can't happen. That's where I kind of draw the line. If the thing It's really interesting. People always ask me, "Well, there's like an infinite number of endings any story could have. So like
Yeah.
how do you like choose where to end?" But for me, when I'm working with a topic or a theme and I know at the end I have to some way somehow complete this theme, it kind of really limits the number of endings and the number of ways a character can go to maybe where I feel like I have a few valid options. And the minute that a character could potentially um, kind of redirect where I want to take the story is where I will stop and step back and say, I have to get this on track. Otherwise, it doesn't serve the story or the purpose of the story.
Mhm.
Um, because I know if my starting point is this, the thing I won't do is I won't change the reason I started writing it. So that's kind of fixed for me.
Yeah.
Anything else is kind of open game, but the minute this becomes antithetical to the thing I'm trying to say, um, then this needs some working on.
And that makes sense because like why, I mean, it's literally the passion of
Yeah,
writing. It's like I have this thing I want to say. But with that as a caveat, let's say the ending is what not only elevated what you were trying to say, but it literally is the period on what you were trying to say. But the way the story's going, you realize halfway through, this is not leading to the ending I have in mind.
interesting.
The
Yeah,
the story is still there. The message is still there, but that period that really launched my idea is definitely not going to work if I keep going the way I'm going. Have you been in that situation? And if not, what would you do in that situation?
I think you have two options in that situation. Um, do I change the ending but to make it still fit the thing I'm trying to do or the thing
Mhm.
I'm trying to say? Or have I actually gone off the rails in my journey, right? Have I actually um, wrote a disservice to the story because it's interesting or fun or, oh, I like when this character says that or does that, right? I
Yeah.
think it needs a little diagnostic at that point, right? You need to kind of check under the hood a little bit. Like, just because these things were interesting or fun, does this actually serve the story in this moment, right?
Yeah.
Because if my initial desires to get to this ending, that means somewhere something went wrong, quote unquote wrong, artistically speaking.
Yeah.
Um, and where is that and why is that? And how did I get in this situation? So you have 2 options. There's a fork in the road that presents itself in that situation.
Yeah.
And maybe you do double down and really like the things that you did change and the organic way this kind of unfold. And it's like, okay, well, where does this take me? Do I like where this takes me? Do I like the inevitable ending here? And if not, right? And what's better, right? You have to kind of weigh your options. And
Yeah.
if not, how do I do a little backtrack, take the other rail, and try and get to the ending that I initially aspired to.
Yeah.
So that's something to always think about.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, the cool factor has leeway with the story. Like this is cool. That
Yeah,
cool always outweighs logic, right? But if it does it too much, the logic is gone and the book becomes something else. But it is important to.
yeah. This kind of goes back to the old adage where usually the lines that the editors suggest a writer takes out are the writer's favorites, right? It's like, "This is my favorite paragraph, this is my favorite chapter," right?
This is the protagonist.
Yeah, and at the insistence of an outside voice looking at it, does it actually serve the story? Does it actually progress the plot, right?
Yeah.
What function does this character, scene, setting serve, right? And so, you do have to metaphorically kill your creations at times for the story. So
Yeah.
sometimes what's fun and cool and exciting or scandalous or salacious, right? Um, doesn't necessarily mean it's actually serving your story.
Yeah, and a good note for any writer, and you could obviously correct me if you think I'm drastically wrong, is every element of the story, every sentence, every action, everything that you do should provide one or more of these three elements: character, plot, or world building. And if you could do those three things within any beat or any moment, you're doing right by your story. If it's doesn't serve character, plot, or world building or any variation of multiple things in that, it might not belong to the it may
Mm,
not be serving
mm.
the overall narrative because it's not doing one of three things you need to see a story have an arc, to see it grow,
Yes, I would agree. As long as we can include things like mood and tone within world building, I'm there with you.
Yeah, but again, if it's one or more of the things and then it's only tone, that wouldn't be serving the story anymore because it's not moving forward either character, plot, or world building or a variation of the three. However, tone could be a blanket on top of one of those elements or more, but tone by itself doesn't move anything. It's like being descriptive for
Well,
descriptive sake. Like the sky is blue. Like it doesn't. But if the character is recognizing the sky, now the character made a choice,
mhm,
right?
yeah. I mean, I think you're talking also about show don't tell, right? Does it
Uh,
advance character to look at the sky?
No, no, not
Um,
not necessarily show don't tell. I'm talking about like because tone is ethereal. It doesn't do anything but color elements of the story. Like tone by itself doesn't have a strength.
well, tone refers to the author's attitude towards a work. Mood, when we talk about mood, we're talking about atmosphere. Um, but so when you say world building, what is included within that?
Well, world building is elevating, and it doesn't always have to be any one of these things, but these are examples. These are arbitrary, but it's cultural, social economics, species, language, the world around you. For example, what is the terrain like?
Right,
But more importantly, what is the terrain different from what we can experience? So obviously, in
right,
my world, I have floating isles, so that's world building. If people see that
right,
magic, the way magic systems works,
correct.
that's world building. As it's anything that brings the world to life and allows it to feel lived in.
Good,
That
yeah.
would be world building by definition.
I think that's coupled with mood to a certain degree, right? Mood is just the emotion a work evokes in a reader, right? So when you describe those things, it's creating a mood. Um, and so I think they're closely related because I think you can take part of that world building and make the same critique that you initially did with things like mood or tone. Like, yeah, we can describe a terrain or see the way a character interacts with terrain. I don't think that in itself necessarily, in and of itself, advances a plot or a character. It can, but it also cannot. It could just be fluff.
Yeah,
Um,
but
yeah,
in that moment, it's no longer world building. It's description, and description by itself is not world building, character, or plot.
I see. So you're kind of separating exposition
Yeah,
out of world building.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
because
it's interesting.
yeah, you
Yeah,
know what I'm saying. Like,
yeah.
but mood, like again, if you just wrote mood by
Mhm,
itself, whatever that is,
mhm,
or even tone, your tonality, what
mhm,
you're trying to bring
mhm.
to that in itself doesn't elevate movement in a story. It's a moment in time. It's like saying this is going to be a dark story, but it's
Right.
not. That doesn't do anything.
So first line, it's a dark and stormy night, right?
It's a dark and stormy night, right?
Right. One of the famous first lines.
Yeah,
Does that really advance things? I don't know. Does that set something up uh, that intrigues one to take the journey of advancement?
yeah.
Maybe.
It's a plot. It's a dark and stormy night. We've already
Mhm,
set the scene. We've added information that elevated the world. The world building is that
mm,
it's a dark and stormy night. The plot is that they are living in a dark and stormy night, right?
mhm.
But the mood and tone are there. I'm
I
not
see.
saying that they aren't there because they're sort of like they color those
Sure.
three elements. But if you just wrote mood or tone,
I see.
they would break the rule because you need one or more of the three elements for a sentence to have value, and that's either or character, world building, or plot. Um, it's better to have more than one, but then how you
Definitely.
dress it up, that's your voice as a writer. That's
Right.
your tone. You're insinuating. That's your mood you're creating. But mood by itself doesn't have any strength to it. You know,
Fair
it's
enough. It has to be tethered. It
yeah.
has to be tethered.
That's all I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah.
But obviously, great writing would add mood and tone to character or to the world building or to like
Yeah, to even have it, in and of itself is not is not even something that one would initially, like, think of, right? Because there's always, intricacy, right, of
yeah.
character and plot, and all the other literary devices there are.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But some writers when they're starting out, they're like, "How do I know if this is working?" I go, "Look at the rules, lift your head, look at what you wrote. Does it accomplish those things?" And the way you write it, it's anything you want to do. Like there's no rule on how you write it. Like that's your
Right,
voice. Like if you want to
right.
use the words you choose, how you use your chapters, how you use your chapter breaks, hard chapter breaks, whatever. But all you got to do is look. Am I including one or more of these elements? If the answer is yes, then great. Is it just the you ever read a book where it's just description in the first paragraph but it's not
Sure.
doing anything.
Right.
It's just like
It's like,
I
"Let's describe this flower for 8 pages." Yeah, it's that thing.
and you're like, but what? And sometimes I tell my clients, if you want to keep that description because like you feel very connected to it, all you got to do is add one of those three elements and allow that description to move through one of those elements, and it'll be valid. So if the plot, if you're describing a flower and the flower is directly related to the plot, now it works. If it's directly related to the character or whatever, now it works. And they usually are like, I never even thought about that. I was like, well, sometimes writing's for you, and
Well,
sometimes
that's
you
like
got to write.
that's the craft part too, I think. That's
Yeah,
like going through the back door, right? And figuring out, "How do I take this thing right now that doesn't work, but I like something about it, and
yeah,
I wanna make it work," right? How do I do that, right? So that's kinda that stepping back, and, that's the engineering of writing.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, 100%. And
Yeah.
great writing is
And that's a lot
rewriting.
of the time, by the way. Dude, that's
Definitely,
like the whole point of editing and revising your work,
yeah,
Who I don't remember who said it, maybe it was, like, Neil Gaiman or someone like that, but it was like, you know, the point of the edit is to make the reader think you knew what you were actually doing and talking about the entire time.
Yeah, that is Neil Gaiman. That's from his masterclass.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's
yeah,
a very smart man. Very smart man.
yeah,
We're getting pretty close to the ending, so I kind of want to jump on some other topics. But could you kind of list out your process from the third without kind of going into the process? Just sort of like for example, if I said I like to do brainstorming, then outlining, and then just kind of like list out that.
yeah. Good. So yeah, so um, step two, when I start writing everything down, and maybe I start getting more, you know, solid with ideas and maybe breakdowns, maybe chapter breakdowns, and then I choose the thing I want to write, and I just relentlessly pursue it. My novel, The Devil and the Diamond, that was my uh, debut novel that was published, and that exists because of quarantine. Right, quarantine happened. I'm like, I'm going to be in the house for a large chunk of time. How can I take advantage of this?
Yeah.
Um, and so that's kind of how I got the novel rolling. It took me like a good year, right, to kind of finish that manuscript. It's like 430 something pages.
How
But
many
then
drafts did
sometimes,
you do?
so I'm the type of writer where I do not spill everything out A through Z.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a chapter or maybe the most like 3, and then I'm going back and I'll stop completely. I'll put a pause on it, and then I'm going back and I'm cleaning up that thing. I am, going under the hood, exploring it. What else could work here? What can make it better? And until I'm satisfied, I'm not moving on. So I'm very incremental like that.
Hmm.
I can't really do the Neil Gaiman thing. If I'm going to move on from something, I need to be pretty comfortable from where I left off, from where I'm coming from,
Okay.
because it all affects the next thing. And so I want to give myself enough room and literary ammunition for the next thing to be happy with what came before. And so that's actually what I do. And then, of course, when it's all over, and then I'll go back and do the whole thing over again.
Yeah.
But I like it this way because I have to go through the whole thing less, right? Because I do it in chunks over and over and over again. So
Yeah.
that's actually how I how I do it.
That's interesting. I do that, but I do that with my extended outlines. So,
Mm,
my outlines are basically a zero draft where I'm discovering a story based on the short form outline, which is just like these things have to happen, and then I kind of like build on it. But after every plot point, I'll go back and I'll clean it up, and then by the time I get to the end of the book, not only am I ready to do my first draft, but it's everything makes sense. The entire plot makes sense. Characters make sense. And I actually have my alpha readers read the extended outline
mm.
because it almost reads like a real book, but it's not. Like it's written in bullet
I
points
was
and
gonna
there's
say,
like
is it
notes.
prose or is it like, bullet points?
Sometimes there's pros, like because like if I get into the mindset of like kind of what do I want this mood to feel like or whatever, like I'll write a prose out, or if like dialogue's there because I want to feel out who the characters are. But it's all bullet pointed and there are notes in there. They're like red
Right.
notes saying this is leading to that or whatever, or and then I'll send that to alpha readers. And the only thing I'm looking for is I'll send them questionnaires and stuff, but I'm looking for feedback on clarity,
Mm,
like what I go, what is the plot, or what do you think is happening, or what do you think is going to happen with this character, and I see if I'm seeding what I am really seeding is really there. And then also I look for, are the characters consistent in their choices and some of their dialogue, because once I know that's right, I know I don't have to worry about that when I'm writing my first draft.
yeah.
So then I just write, and I just write.
Believability, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the beta reader reads the first draft, and because it's novelized,
Mhm.
and that's where I'm like, what's your experience with it? Did you enjoy it? Did you feel it? Now it's more about readability.
Yeah.
And then I edit it again based on beta reader notes, and then I send it to an editor,
There you
and
go.
and then that you got to do your line edit and then your copy edit, which is important. All right, so since we got about 10 minutes,
Yep.
what are your thoughts on the middle? No, okay.
You always throw a twist in there at the end.
Yeah.
That's what we call the final suspense in the plot structure.
Right. A lot of my friends are always like, I can never take you seriously because you say stuff seriously, but you always like the way you end your thoughts, like, it throws me off. Um, well, we probably can't really hit on your experience within the industry. So let's talk about your journey a little bit. We could probably get 10 or 15 minutes in,
Sure.
and then we'll call it a day. I don't want to
Yeah.
go too late, you know.
Sure.
Um, we're about 15 minutes in, so I know you're busy. You're a busy man.
I have to go
Do
teach.
they let you out of the attic ever though? You know, you look
No,
like
I
you're in an
I
attic.
actually commit myself here.
It's not an attic, it's a shed, buddy. Oh, my bad. Imagine that. So what was your journey for as a novelist? I know you're saying the pandemic happened, you know,
Mm,
where we got lockdown and stuff,
yep.
but your journey, because I know you're mostly started as a screenwriter and a poet. Like those were really your areas of
So
attention.
here's kind of my quick journey. Ever since I was a small child, if you ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up, type of thing, the answer was a writer. Right? That's I always knew. I definitely wanted to be a writer. In high school, I really started, honing a certain craft. I mean, it was essays for English class and things like that. But that's probably my senior year of high school. I became a half decent writer. I took a creative writing class as an elective my senior year. I actually started working on a novel. Like I was very ambitious, 17-year-old or 18-year-old, whatever it was. And then I went off to college and I studied English education. So I
Mhm.
was like, all right, well, at least I like education. I have something to fall back on. I can write and teach, right? Because I've now friends and colleagues that was their path. Where
Yeah.
um, and so I said, at least that's an option for me. And so while I I took this basic novella I wrote in that creative writing class in high school, and I spent the 4 years of college and also a little bit of grad school writing whenever I could, when I could get the chance on a vacation, or when I didn't have a lot of
During
work to
sex,
do.
yeah, little
Yeah,
things.
anything.
Yeah,
Um,
anytime I can get right.
and so when I was in grad school, I finished a manuscript. It was a science fiction novel, and I sent it out. I did the whole thing, the whole list, the hundreds of publishers, and I had a few nibbles. And I had a
Yeah.
few nibbles all the way to the end where they wanted to read the whole thing, because first you send a query letter, then you send a chapter, then 3 chapters, then
Wait,
you
wait,
maybe
wait, pause.
20.
Is the query letter a part of the LGBTQ?
Oh, it's the best part.
It's the queerest
Yeah,
part. It's
that's
great.
the you're always querying.
Yeah, you always had it.
Yeah,
Let's be honest, as novelists,
querying and questioning. I mean, come on.
we're queer because we have to romantically get into the minds of every gender, every perspective. Like we literally live inside variations of creatures.
It is literally our function.
Yeah, like we're
Um,
technically pansexuals.
yeah,
Bec- be-
pansexuals.
Well, pansexuals,
Yeah,
right? Because you have to believe what you're writing to
yeah,
to be pure to their
yeah.
intentions and motivations.
Yeah, you have to tell the truth, right? You're not lying. Like actor
Yeah,
people are always like, "Actors just lie for a living." No, like we tell the truth. It's
yeah,
actually the opposite.
exactly. But
But
go ahead.
anyway,
So you did
so
query letters.
I got all the way to with a couple literary agents, and ultimately they told me, "We're not willing to take a risk on someone who's never been published before." Like
Oh,
just
interesting.
point
Okay.
blank. And
Yeah.
so at that point, I decided, okay, I'm just going to build up my publication credits. And that is when I decided to start writing short stories and poetry. And I made it my mission. So for like 10 years after that, always writing. I published a lot of short stories. I published some poetry. Then I started getting into screenplays and theatrical plays. Got some of that stuff produced. I produced some of my own stuff, and then the explosion happened. I was just catapulted into the art world, and then I'm like, oh, I want to be an actor too.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
went back and I studied acting and blah 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 blah. So I have an extensive amount of short stories and poetry published, and then when quarantine just came about, that's when I was like, this is the time I need to jump back in this game, because a lot of that was fear too, like that fear of being rejected, of working for years on a novel and having it going absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
And I took it out of the drawer a couple times and tried to, restart that engine. And ironically, it never even got to the place where it initially did years
Yeah, but you
before. I never
wrote it,
got it. Yeah, but I
you
wrote
know?
it and it's still there and it still exists. And I
Yeah,
think that's a lesson in and of itself, because it's
because it's the
always
hardest thing to do.
it's always in the proverbial drawer, right? That could be pulled out at any time, right?
Yeah, just make
Um,
sure there's nobody around to see it, you don't wanna scare anyone.
well, you know.
Hey, is your sci-fi book alien to others? No, alright.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so this time around was a little bit different. I was picked up for publication. It wasn't by a major press, but it was by an independent press
Yeah.
out in California called Henry Gray Publishing, and then there it is,
Well
and so I get to look at it.
for anyone listening, sorry, that's it's the devil.
Yeah,
That's the chap because I sold my soul. They're always looking for the soul back.
nice. Is he in the diamond?
Yes, yes,
Good.
yeah. See what I did there? I
Yeah,
brought it back to you. All right. It's a war torn world in my head.
yeah.
I know. I know your book. I
Yeah,
may
I
have
think I
skimmed
brought
it
it back
over.
to myself, which is the mark of a great artist, I
That's anyway. Yeah, if
think.
you like war stories, the his book is definitely. I believe it takes place in World War One or two.
Too, so the book is really
Two.
about baseball right after World War II.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I got only as far as the Mad Men moment,
Yeah.
where switches the identity with one guy and then starts a marketing firm. No, okay. Oh yeah. So for anyone listening, when it comes to publishing, what can someone expect? And obviously, you don't have to go into great detail. There are certain things that are private and stuff like that. I get that, but what can you go into as far as the process of what a publishing company at that level does for you as a writer, and what are the benefits and the cons to your experience with that publishing?
Which really it's interesting. So if it's a kind of a small independent press, it's usually like a small team of people, right? Which is a very different experience than if it's like a big firm, right? Where they can have far more marketing opportunities. So if you're published under, a smaller press, an independent press, you're in it. You're 50% of kind of like putting your stuff out there, right? And so it's not that you write the book and now you're done, and
You're successful.
it's other people's jobs, right,
Yeah.
to like market. It's like no, you have to be out there. Get the book tour, the book signing tour up and running. You should be reaching out to people. Your publisher and editor will also reach out to people, but it doesn't end, right? That's the one thing that I think people realize very quickly. And it shouldn't end. It should be a long process because people have to discover your book, right?
Mhm.
Usually that first phase is friends and family, right? And then what's after that, right?
I'm sorry, friends and friends? What?
Yeah, I
What?
know.
Friends?
You
Ah,
can
Jesus.
purchase them online. It's
Yeah, yeah, only friends.
yeah, exactly. Whatever you got to do to sell your book, you know what I mean?
This girl loves me, by the way. Oh, why? I give her $20 a month.
Yeah. You know what else costs $20? My novel.
Did you choose the price or did the publisher choose the price?
We had a discussion.
And they were like, "This is what it's gonna be," and you were like,
No,
"Okay."
actually, no. I mean, this is all varying depending on who you're working with. But I
Right.
was very lucky that we have a lot of discussions and come to an agreement on things. And even when we're kind of thinking two different things or whatnot, we always leave the table satisfied and happy if there's compromise or whatnot. Because for the price, like my train of thought was, well, I mean, psychologically, I don't want to like break that barrier, that $20 barrier, if it might make people. So I'd rather take the hit on the short term with the possibility of reaping the benefits of the long term. But who's to say what's right and wrong?
Do you have you ever gotten a note from your publisher that you disagreed with, but it ended up being beneficial to the book?
Yes, real quick story.
Go for it.
Um, so this art design, if I just may, the art design for my novel, I actually got to handpick the artist and give a level of direction of what I would love to see, and my publisher was like, "Okay," and then when the finished product came, he was like, "This scene isn't in the book, like, at all. Like, I feel like we're leading our audience astray, that we're promising something on the front cover that isn't actually there." But I love the artwork so much that my rebuttal, my compromise is I will write a new scene, right, and make it seamlessly fit in, I promise, organically, that sort of justifies this cover. And he's like, all right, well, you could try it. Let's see what happens. That kind of became that passage my favorite part of the whole novel. And people who have read it, it's one of their favorite passages of the whole novel. I justified it through a dream sequence, and it works well. As a matter of fact, at my Hoboken book signing, that's the passage I chose to read aloud. So to answer your question, yes, like great creative artistic things can come out of practical, logistical, pragmatic needs from the publishing editor perspective.
All right. So this scene
Mhm.
is now in the book.
That is correct.
Can you tell us where in the book? Like what beginning, middle, end, or is it
It's in the last third. It's in
the
the last
last the
third.
last turd?
Yeah.
Um, do you oh, speaking of third, do you write in 3 acts or do you write in 4, 6, 9, 7? How
I I'm not strict. I tend to think in the 5-act structure, but
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
not beholden to that, right? I think it's a great starting place. You sort of lay things out, and then, things may shift a little bit, right? Sometimes your climax isn't exactly the midpoint, but,
Yeah, tell
whatnot.
my girlfriend that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
I'm always early. I'm in the
Yeah.
first act, you
Yeah,
know?
you're first act.
She's
You don't
like, "I'm
even
the 3rd
have
act."
3 acts. There's
Yeah,
just 1
yeah.
act.
Yeah,
It's
we're
it's really
5
long,
acts,
but there's
1
a 1
act.
act,
Yeah,
1
yeah,
act
yeah.
structure.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm good. No.
Yeah. What can I say?
Yeah, yeah. She comes
But
back for seconds, you know?
yeah, I think any sort of like dramatic structure is a good starting point. But like anything else, artistic, you can start to move a little bit away from that at times, right? Anything new that is created usually stems from a breaking of some sort of norm or writing rule or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I think about it.
All right. I wanna go again, I haven't read your but I only read the first 2 chapters or whatever is available on the
Yeah.
Amazon, which if it's a really good, quick read, those chapters, so if anyone wants to kinda
Yeah.
check it out, I'll have your link in the description below, but,
Cool.
um, can I make a guess of what the scene is, and then you could
Sure.
say yay or nay?
Yeah, sure.
Alright, my f b if it's in the 3rd act, right, I'm assuming it's a PTSD experience. Am I close?
I would say you are close. I would say that's like halfway there.
Halfway there. Alright,
Yeah.
yeah, because I feel like there's definitely, like, something happening with the character's experience per se.
Yes.
Like, they're because you're saying it ha they he you said, basically it's someone who's in World War II, and
Mhm.
then it takes place and he's playing baseball, or it has to do with baseball afterwards.
Yeah,
I'm
correct. So
assuming yeah.
so the story very generally is about two soldiers, one American, one Japanese, who meet on the battlefield, and then years later, not years later, but then later after they return from war and are trying to acclimate to a post-war life, they meet again on the ball field.
I bet
Um,
they do.
yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And so yeah, no, I would say that was a really good guess. That certainly brings it up to a certain point. That's definitely part of it.
Alright, excellent, and I'm assuming, there's fireworks involved.
Yeah, so the idea, at least artistically, was that the fireworks sort of morphed into
It's
bombs
yeah.
detonating in the background, and so you have the morphing, right, of these two worlds of baseball and war. Um,
Yeah.
and that's definitely what the artist was trying to depict. And then I had to depict from the piece of art,
Yeah.
which was a great challenge.
Now, if I may, that's really interesting that you're going that way because my father, is obviously not with us anymore because he's old, but uh, he was in Vietnam, and he used to tell me that sometimes he'd be sitting on the couch,
Hmm.
and we had like a big sliding door to the backyard, and he'd be
Hmm.
watching a movie or something that was like a war movie, and he
Yeah.
said he would just turn to the right to look out the window, and he would just see explosions and
Wow.
like people dying and running and fighting, and he would just like slowly turn back to the television because at that time he was like working through it and
Yeah.
PTS and but that's interesting because like the little things to someone who doesn't have PTSD, we it's fireworks, but to other
Right.
people it literally ignites, no pun intended, literally, but it ignites these visceral auditorial and visual experiences almost of nightmares uh, that they have to kind of navigate to. So I kind of appreciate that you're exploring that in your novel as a theme. That is a theme, I'm assuming, right? Because it's
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the sense triggers, right, into sense memories, right, is very, very vivid, and sometimes it's not always the things we think it will be, right?
yeah,
The things that can just kind of bring something back. And that's always, definitely always interesting to explore through literature.
yeah. Like I have traumas when people hug me because I don't. Just- please,
Just
please don't
one
throw me
time
in
you
the
just squeezed
cage.
too tight and it was all over for the hugs.
Yeah, I was like, what's going on? Um, Well, you and I grew up in a time where, like, our grandparents and like aunts and uncles would kiss us on the face and the lips, and we'd be like, we're like three, and we're like, and you're Italian, right? You're so
Yeah, there's a lot of cheek kissing.
yeah. It's just like, why? I don't want it. Consent, consent. And they're like, it's what we do, and I was like, I punch people. That's what I do.
Yeah, I have a different greeting.
Yeah. Why does he always hit us in the balls? All right. So before we get going, why don't you tell people how to find you?
Sure. You can check out my production company, G&E Productions. We have a website. You can find me on Facebook. The production company has an Instagram, G&E Productions. And so yeah, I'm pretty open to friend requests.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, and I'll definitely I'll put your website in the link as well into the description before below. More importantly, I always ask one question before the end. It's the same question on every show. What is one piece of advice you discovered about writing, either through someone else telling you or yourself discovering it, that completely changed the way you approach the writing process?
Oh, that's interesting. My microphone just, I mean, my
Oh,
headphones, like, oh, I'm scared. I'm jumping out.
yeah.
What
Woo!
is one piece of advice you discovered about writing that completely changed the way you approach the writing process? I would have to say, this comes down to being open to completely changing what you perceived your story was going to be, right? Sometimes that can be very advantageous, right? Don't be so strict. Just because you begin and you're like, I know where this is going and I know it will end, you have to be open to change, right?
Hmm.
Whether that is a character, whether that is the ending, you have to be open to the possibility that your story wants to be something else. And then, of course, like we discussed before, then you make that determination, right, of what is worth it,
Yeah.
right? But to not be so strict, to be open to not knowing, right? To be open to possibility. Um, I think that was kind of the like moment, right? And that pertains to probably any medium of art. I feel the same way in filmmaking when you get into the editing room and you think this is the movie, and then you realize maybe this is not the movie. Maybe this is the movie.
Yeah, we need a
Um,
pizza delivery guy in this scene.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Um,
so to being open to your own preconceived notions about your own work.
Now, did you discover that through yourself, like in research, or did someone kind of like throw that upon you and you took it in?
Um, I think it's probably an amalgamation of the two. Like feel like I have a lot of colleagues that experience the same thing I did, and then it's like, well, you have to test those waters, right? Like experiment and see what works better. And then by experimenting, you're like, oh, I guess they were right. I guess they were right, and that I should heed this advice.
Yeah, and it worked out. All right,
Yeah,
excellent. Thank you very much.
thank
And
you.
as you can see, if you're watching on the screen, Gregory Cioffi, did I say that correct?
Yes, sir.
Cioffi. It's because we're Italians.
That's what it is.
It's it's not C off E. Oh, how would someone mess it up? Psi off
Well,
I,
I get a
right?
lot of like coffees and
Oh,
coffees.
yeah, I could see coffee. I could see
Yeah.
someone messing it up, but they don't.
The Americanization of the name would be Siafi, so that was, like, kind of popular when people wanted to, like, Americanize,
Yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah, well, my last name's Bellezza in America,
yeah.
but it's Bellezza in Italiano or Italia or Sicilia, depending. So it's always fun to see names in there. Anyway,
And get
all
them utterly wrong.
just like, what is your name? One person said they called me up on stage doing comedy, like Thomas J. Baraka?
B.
B.
And then from that point on, you're known as just Thomas J. That's your stage name. That's what sticks. You have to be open to these things.
Yeah, well, a lot of people call me TJB. They go, "What's up, TJB?" Like
Nice.
in the comedy world, but
There's a
anyway.
certain ring to it,
Yeah, it's like boom, boom, boom.
and that
Anyway.
also stems from just not knowing how to say your name.
I hate when they get my first name wrong. They call me a-hole.
Yeah,
Anyway, uh,
more common than you think.
yeah, I
Like, why
hate
does
that you're right.
everyone get this guy's name wrong?
Yeah, every time.
Yeah.
All right, Gregory, thank you so very much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Devil in the Diamond. Check it out. Shameless plug.
Yeah, shameless plug. And everyone who's watching, remember, as always, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye.